This is TWiT.
Jono Bacon. Jono, welcome back to the show.
How you doing? It's good to be back. It's been a while.
I know. I'm doing great. I was so impressed by your keynote talk. I think it was at All Things Open or maybe the Red Hat Summit, one of those, I think,
Yep.
where you talked about community and even how it's evolved over time. Just start riffing. What do you want to talk about here?
Yeah, I mean, do you want to talk about metal? I'm really into metal.
No.
I'm happy to talk about whatever you want. I'll
actually give you a question here. Let's start with it this way. Okay.
Oh, geez.
You've been involved in community building now and teaching about community and actually doing it as your profession for many, many years now. And the question I had to you right after you gave your keynote was, how has community changed in the time frame that you were doing this?
Yeah.
What's evolved?
Yeah, I mean, I started out, getting interested in this in, I think, about 1998, and then which is when I got interested in Linux and open source. And I didn't really start working professionally until about 2002. In my mind, where it's evolved significantly is particularly in those earlier days, no one really knew what they were doing. So everybody was trying to figure out, how to kind of get people interested and involved and how to incentivize people. And, of course, people tried things that worked and people tried things that didn't work. And I think what's happened in the last 10 years or so is that the awareness and the knowledge of which of these things work and which of these things don't work has become much more formalized. Part of the reason why I wrote, I remember when I moved to the US in 2008, one of the things that I don't know what had happened, but something had struck me around that time that, this whole community building lark offers a huge amount of value for companies, but there really isn't any body of knowledge that can help guide people with what to do. And I don't profess to be, an expert and have all of the answers on this kind of stuff. But I wanted to, one, write a book, which is what the Art of Community was. Two, start a conference to bring community managers together, which is what the Community Leadership Summit is. And then three was for me to just expose myself to as many different types of organizations as possible. Like back then, I'd already been working primarily in open source. And the writing of the book actually led to that, because then people started reaching out about consultancy, and I started working with like financial services institutions and things like that, which I had no idea about.
Wow.
And since then, I think what we've seen is community management and developer relations and things like that has become an actual role in companies. Like when I took my role at Canonical in 2006, I'd never heard the term community manager before. The first time I'd ever heard of it was from Mark Shuttleworth. And now, of course, community management is a thing that lots of people do. So I think, like anything, it's kind of like, in the early days of, like with the Renaissance is when, those kind of like, those disciplines became formalized. I think we've seen that particularly in the last 10 years with community as applied to technology.
Well, one of the things I've noticed in doing this show for 10 years now is that the organizations and projects that have actually specifically brought on someone called a community manager have definitely grown much more rapidly, and are also apparently a lot more aware of the impact that open source is in both directions, both towards the company that originated the product and towards the shared uses and building ons and standing on the shoulders of. Can you speak a little bit to that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, this is something I've learned a lot about since I started consulting. So I started consulting full time just under a couple of years ago, and but I've been doing it on the side for years. And one of the things from not just working within a single company, as most of us do when you've got a job. I just realized that lots and lots of people saw similar types of value, which is, better engagement with your users or your customers, brand recognition, production of whether it's software or whether it's material or support. So like tangible value. But then, of course, it becomes like more specific depending on the industry. So in open source, we see a lot of technology production, right? If you're a company, you've got an open source project, or you've got a platform where people build extensions or modules, then people build technology and it benefits your overall offering, right? More and more people start using it. Whereas if you are, for example, in the financial services world, like I mentioned, then the value of community is primarily about optimizing how people work together and reducing silos. Like one company, for example, that I work with, which is a large bank, we're building a community inside that company, and nothing will ever go beyond the walls of that company. So for them, it's not an outreach. It's not a public thing. It's not the benefit of, it has no benefit to their customers. That's all about helping the company to work as efficiently as possible, and community is a tool in accomplishing that. Because otherwise, if you don't do that, you basically get people stuck in their little, cubicles, locked in their silos, and then the left hand can't talk to the right hand. So to me, I see it in two layers. You've got that like underlying layer that basically applies to everybody, which frankly is sat on a lot of psychology. And increasingly in recent years, I've become a bit of a psychology buff. I'm by nowhere near as experienced as an actual, like someone, a student of psychology. But for me, psychology provides a real a set of guardrails or a scaffolding for understanding that layer. And then what sits on top of that, which is primarily the execution and the tactics piece, that's more specific to the different industries.